Hello everyone. I'm Milena. I'm currently stuck outside of my apartment because I have somebody bringing my keys to me. Thank you, Mariana. Yeah, I just forgot my keys in the place I was last. I'm hoping to get into my apartment and to my cat in 20 minutes and be able to sit in the comfort of my home and be with you all. I'm the moderator for today's meeting. And just to mention the format of these events that we're having, Feminist Kitchen. So this is the third Feminist Kitchen we're having, organized by Feminist Workshop, a Ukrainian organization. So what we basically do is that we gather some amazing speakers from Ukraine and internationally to discuss around some specific topics that are important for the times that we are living in. And as we discuss these topics, we have an amazing chef, Katya, who you will get to meet in a second, who is going to introduce a dish and also share the instructions and the ingredients to make it. So you are free to prepare this dish as you listen to this conversation. So imagine that, you know, we are in your kitchen and we are all in a common kitchen together cooking while we discuss key feminist topics. Today we have amazing speakers, 4 speakers. I must say one of them is running a little bit late, but she will be with us. And let me, I think that's all I have to share for now. Let me start off with Katya, give the word to Katya so she can tell us about this dish that she's making, Holubtsi. In Armenia, we have cabbage rolls that are vegan, that we make with beans and garbanzo beans and lentils, and it's super delicious.
I live in Georgia. They also like to use beans. They have this layered bread with beans called lobiani. That's like my favorite.
I love lobiani. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. This region is like very much interconnected. Actually, that's the topic of the conversation today. I mean, not that specifically, but it's particularly about joint feminist movements and about building solidarity across contexts. So I think that this particular dish, where you roll something, right, inside of cabbage leaves, it's so common, right? So for example, there's the grape leaves that people make in this region that, for example, in Armenia, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Turkey, this is also very much common. I don't know if you have a similar dish in Ukraine, but rolling cabbage leaves is also very much common in this region. So it's going to be an interesting sort of way to look at layering something and rolling something in like a vegetable and discussing how can we build a joint feminist movement between, for example, different kinds of like sides that have different kinds of power dynamics.
I will cook like a blogger from my mobile phone. Okay, so I repeat, my name is Katya. I'm a shelter coordinator in Feminist Workshop. Here I'm a chef because I love cooking. I will not join to conversation. I will just disturb you for a few minutes for say some cooking steps. Also, you can ask me some questions if you want about the dish. Today we cook holubtsi or holubtsi. It's a traditional Ukrainian dish because it's really cheap, easy, and tasty dish. Usually, holubtsi cook with rice and meat mince. It's like everyday holubtsi. Today we will cook special holubtsi. It's meatless and we cook it traditionally to Christmas dish. Surprise! Despite this, I realized that holubtsi, meatless holubtsi, is really good for summer evening too. because when you want to eat something easy without fat, without meat, it's really suit. So we will have two steps. First one is preparing cabbage and buckwheat. Next step is make vegetable gravy. Sort stuff cabbage lives with combined buckwheat and cook vegetables. And fourth step is add tomato sauce and put our holubtsi in buckwheat. So we will start our first step. We will take this cabbage and buckwheat, this big cabbage, and we have to remove the core head cabbage, and put it in water and cook for 5 minutes and start to carve. After we will separate the leaves like one by one on a plate or some cutting boards, and trim this hard part from each leaves to easy wrapping. Let's start. I will cook, you will discuss and watching.
The first person that we have who is going to speak is Dafna, who is a Ukrainian anthropologist, activist, feminist. So following Dafna, we will have Olga speak. So I'm going to give the word to Dafna to start off, to reflect on the question of, is a joint feminist movement possible across contexts with power imbalances and sides that are, we can call strong and weak? And then how can we build solidarity across those sides?
Thank you so much, Milena, and thanks everyone for coming. Milena mentioned that I'm an anthropologist, so like a lot of anthropologists, I like to start with seemingly unrelated stories. And I want to start with an article about a search for extraterrestrial life that I read a couple of weeks ago. Because to be honest, when I was reading this article about how scientists were embarking on this project of searching for the life as we don't know it, I was kind of thinking, I was amazed actually at how courageous, but also how difficult this endeavor should be, to imagine something radically different from what we are used to imagine a radically different way of being in the world. And honestly, reading this article kind of gave me hope, because if there are people on this planet who are willing to commit to such an arduous and difficult task, there definitely should be people who are willing to commit to a task of building feminist solidarities and bridging differences within this planet, right? So I was actually thinking like, if we are like so courageous that we want to look for extraterrestrial life as we don't know, and then maybe, I mean, like feminist solidarity across different contexts does not sound like a possible task. So I was thinking a lot about this question, and one of the idea that I was often arriving at when thinking about the possibility of feminist solidarity across different contexts was actually this idea of positionality that stems from decolonial and postcolonial theory. And essentially, this idea of positionality teaches us that the context that we are located in, our social identities, our social relationships that we are embedded in, all those things, they have an impact. They shape how we see the world. They shape also how we understand the world, how we see certain events, stuff like that. And of course, with this comes this idea of a limitation, of course, of limitations of what we can and cannot understand, emotionally, rationally, or both. And I was actually thinking a lot about this idea of built-in limitations as a good enough idea, as a good enough place to start actually building global solidarity. Because it seemed to me that acknowledging one's limitations necessarily means also having to rely on others to compensate for that. So essentially this, I think, acknowledging, understanding one's limitations of what we can and cannot understand, it can serve as a pathway to trust and to build, to bridge building. That essentially you always need other people, right, who can complement your vision of the world. I think for this task of building feminist solidarity, it also allows us, this idea of limitations allows us to better search for connections across different contexts. It allows us to see connections between different contexts where we didn't know that those connections exist, but also it kind of allows us to see to see where the connections that we may have expected, where those connections are just simply not there, where it was just kind of our illusion. And one of the questions that was also arising for me out of all this thinking was actually this idea of tokenism, and in this provided the idea of acknowledging one's built-in limitations is a good enough place to start building solidarities, because it leads to this idea of trust in others. How do we avoid tokenism when we relied on others? Sometimes we face this situation when just like one Ukrainian was kind of like included just for the sake of inclusion. This person was given like 5 or 7 or like 10 minutes of time to speak, and then essentially cut off, and then like, you know, like smart people and experts can kind of like chime in and provide their expertise and stuff. I think like this is what I mean by tokenism. When people just like are included not really for the sake of hearing and engaging with their perspective, and like in this case that I'm trying to make, in not for the sake of allowing them to contribute to kind of like your limitations, not for the sake of asking them to kind of ameliorate this kind of limitation that you have, but just for the sake of, you know, like putting a check mark that, oh yes, this person has been included. Yes, we have heard the Ukrainian perspective. Now you stay silent, and smart people, the experts in the room, will join in. This is what I mean by tokenism.
I cut this part and made this list. Thank you. Perfect. So it's very soft and you can easily roll things in it.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Olga. I'm based in Kiev, Ukraine. I'm part of this a collective which is called Solidarity Collectives, which is an anti-authoritarian volunteer group, which deals with the problems caused by war, both supporting the military, our like anti-authoritarian friends at the front line, and supporting civilians. Yeah, so yeah, I'm a feminist, but I'm not part of any feminist movement, any kind of feminist organization. My attitude is very, very practical. Even though I have a sort of academic background, but I am really skeptical about everything like connected to academia, like roundtables, conferences. You know, I had enough of that, and I try to avoid it in my activism as well. And the only maybe thing that made me join this meeting is also the kitchen thing, because it's not just speaking, but also doing something. So yeah. And as for the question, I also was thinking of the possibility of some kind of global solidarity in this context of Ukraine war. Not only about global feminist solidarity, we can also speak about solidarities among other groups, like for example, for us with anti-authoritarian activists around the world. Yeah, but to be honest, after the full-scale invasion, I really reconceptualized, like had a second thought about this possibility of like some kind of global support according to someone's like views. And at first I was super frustrated and super disappointed in the very idea of this global solidarity, because Ukrainian all the time had experienced lots of problems with finding solidarity in our fellow like activists, for example, because Ukrainians might seem too militant for them, because Ukrainians demand mostly like it goes for Ukrainian feminists, Ukrainian, I don't know, leftists, Ukrainian eco activists. They all seem very like militant to some people who just, you know, like praise peace. So they like accuse us of being not true feminists, for example, because war, army is something really tied to patriarchy and to this male world, and for many feminists it's difficult to accept. So in this kind of solidarity, I don't really believe like on a really global level. But of course, I feel like there is a lot of solidarity on this basic grassroots level between some networks, some organizations. We get a lot of help from feminist organizations who receive this help from other feminist organizations abroad. And we also, so we work as the same network. Yeah, and so I believe in this particular situation, the support, the solidarity should be practical. Give the word to those whom you feel are your like comrades, your solidarity, whom you address your solidarity to, actually, and respect their position in the first place, and not you know, try to put their opinions, views in some kind of scheme, some kind of existing pattern, even if it was described, let's say, by Judith Butler, for example. It's still can be wrong in this particular circumstances.
We will chop our vegetables. We have mushrooms, onion, carrots, and garlic. And now we do fillings. We will fry it on medium heat.
I'm an activist with Radical Women. As Milena said, we are a socialist feminist grassroots group based primarily in the United States, but also Australia. And we are internationalists because we don't think that women will ever be free under capitalism. And since that's a global system, we need to make common cause with women around the world. So we currently have relations with feminists in Latin America and also the spontaneous movement of Afghan women. And that's an example of a privileged country, feminists, working with less privileged. I mean, my nation destroyed Afghanistan. And it is on us as radical women to acknowledge this and to support the women in Afghanistan, to listen and to learn from them. So I think Dafna's comments on tokenism, Olga, when you talked about, you know, the peacekeepers who don't want to, who are alienated, the feminists who are alienated by militarism, I think as feminists, we have to listen to the women that are in other situations. And war is a situation that only some of us are in right now. I think for me, what makes it possible to collaborate with feminists from around the world is our shared feminism and our view of the world. I think everybody comes to these situations with preconceived ideas, a way of viewing the world. And I don't know that it's going to work, Olga, for us just to concentrate on practical matters. If those practical matters lead us to talking about our view of the world, who is the enemy, for example, I think that's a beginning. And I think this kind of talk that we're having today is an important beginning. Ultimately, of course, we want action. We want solidarity and action from feminists around the world. So an example that I wanted to raise is that recently the spontaneous movement of Afghan women had let their contacts know that the UN had recently issued a report that the plight, the horrible situation for women in Afghanistan, they blamed on the United States government because when the White House settled an agreement with the Taliban 2 years ago for leaving Afghanistan, they said not one word about women in this agreement. And that just gave the Taliban the green light to go ahead and do what they're doing. And we agree, we in Radical Women, we agree that our government is responsible and bears a responsibility for what is happening with women in Afghanistan today. So we passed this statement and knowledge on to our sister organization, the Freedom Socialist Party, and they put a notice about it in the newspaper, in their newspaper, so that people would know, because the UN is not publishing this report. So even though the expert UN guy from Afghanistan wrote this report, the UN doesn't really want it to get out. So I think those are some thoughts and examples, I think, of, you know, ways that we can build solidarity, and we have to have mutual respect for each other and for our views, and figure out a way of talking about not just our similarities, but our differences. And I hope that contributes to the discussion.
Sorry, this is my dog.
Kalau dari
Lisa, my dog Lisa. Yeah.
Yes, here in the US, we have a very stratified society, as you probably know, the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor. And we in Radical Women believe that if you lift up the people at the bottom, you're lifting everybody up. So we really believe in the leadership of women of color, of what we call the most oppressed, lesbians in the LGBTQ movement, trans people these days are so much under attack. And that's where we concentrate our work. We recognize that, for example, in the recent defeat around abortion rights, it is the poor and women of color, etc., who are the most hurt and impacted by what the Supreme Court has done here in the United States. So we do think that, Milena, you were talking about issues and practical. The two things kind of go together. You know, if we didn't have in Radical Women an understanding that, you know, if you lift up the bottom, everything rises, then we wouldn't be paying as much attention to people that we think really provide the hope and leadership for revolutionary change in the United States and the world. So I think the issues, the ideas, and the practical go together. You can't just be a talk shop, but if you're a talk shop without some background, some thoughts, then you're just randomly acting. So I think the two go together. That my organization supports the Ukrainian call, and I call for the end of NATO and the end of the Pentagon. But I also support your call for arms. And that too is a very practical thing to do. So I do understand, and to a degree, you know, the circumstances you're in and your call for practical help.
Katya, I'm so curious what's happening. You're almost done with the stuffing, I think. And you opened that like top and I'm like, oh, I want to smell what it smells like now.
Yeah. Look at this tasty saute. It's cooking. Yeah, we will go to the next step and we will do rolls, cabbage rolls. Okay, we have to take this cabbage leaf, put, we combined buckwheat and saute, and put and take like 1 spoon, put inside, or we have big list so we can have more, and do this like, oh, it's Holubtsi. And now we have to put it to the baked dish, and that's it. Let's do.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up to the audience, and Yosh has already volunteered herself to start off and kick off the questions and the comments. Please go ahead, Yosh.
Yeah, I have one new reflection. I was thinking about this practical way of building solidarity. It's also very understandable for myself. We were discussing at previous Feminist Kitchen that our the best experience with Italian feminist activists that we were building like new connections in a organizing humanitarian aid with feminist organizations. But now my new reflection about this is that I started to question myself, why do we have to build to supply water, or why do we have to like organize these new chains of supplying medicine in Ukraine, and why for us feminists and among the feminist movement in Ukraine there are many educated people speaking English and sharing similar views about like our imagine of our vision of the better future in the whole world. But why do we think that this practical solidarity is something the most important now? And I think it's one of the reasons is because we couldn't do more, because our messages was not heard in the very beginning of the war. Because I remember that in the beginning of full-scale invasion, everybody or almost everybody in Ukraine, we were spreading an appeal to close the sky, to provide more support to Ukraine, to defend our whole territory. But very soon we understood that it is not possible, it is not achievable. So that's why we have more deaths. That's why we have more humanitarian needs. That's why all we can do as feminists or as the many activists all over Ukraine, it's just to provide more and more humanitarian aid, like because somebody who has to do this peace building work in the world, like structures as UN or other big structures, they could not do this work properly. And it's, for me, it's like, it's not that I prefer to do this only this work. It's something that like I have no other choice.
And hi everyone, especially Dafna, who is a friend of mine. Hi. Yeah, I'm Valentina. I'm originally from Ukraine. Have been living in Denmark for many years and doing my PhD here at the University of Copenhagen. And I mean, I'm also using a lot of feminist theory, feminist methods, so very familiar with feminism on a more theoretical level, but also trying to engage with feminist issue in my everyday life. And when talking about feminist solidarity across, I mean, different nations, but now we're talking more specifically, I think, feminist solidarity with Ukrainian feminists, because it is, I mean, it isn't quite a big issue, that it is something that has been lacking. And I think we've been talking about practical issues, but I think practical issues cannot be addressed or solved or helped through solidarity if there's no agreement on a more abstract, you could call it ideological level. For instance, Luma mentioned that she does support sending more weapons to Ukraine, and I think that was great, because I was myself personally sitting and thinking, you know, what her stance was on that, because there are a lot of feminist organizations around the world that do not support what they view as a militarization of society. They do not name the oppressor and the victim in this scenario, and again, do not acknowledge that, I mean, feminists in Ukraine were also pacifist until 2014. I myself was very much a pacifist, but we were forced to become or engage with this militarization, not because we wanted to, but because Russia invaded us. So yeah, I just wanted to voice that and to throw that out there.
Please feel free to ask questions to the speakers and or reflect on anything that's been said.
I'm also in Radical Women, a different part of the US than Luma. And I wanted to also add, you know, that for us, feminism is not a movement for women only. It's a movement of all oppressed people against all different forms of oppression, and we welcome male feminists. We fight for transgender people and fight for racial equality. And I mean, many feminists are only about women, but so I wanted to specify that. And you know, when we first were witnessing the invasion of Ukraine, we did look at how are women being affected, because you have to always seek that out. It's never front page news about how women were like 90% of the refugees trying to get to safety with their children and the old people, and what it was like crossing the border, and then the impact of women who were oppressed minorities as Roma people and Jewish people, and how different aspects of oppressed communities in Ukraine were being affected by the whole rise of fascism, which is also happening here. You know, so there's always very complex issues, and women are at the crux of those issues. And so I see women and feminists also needing to be part of solving those issues and showing that solidarity. We were wanted to observe and respect women who were fighting, defending, you know, fighting for the right to not only fill in for the social services that are needed, but also to be armed and defend their communities. So that solidarity it does have to be concrete, you know, but I think we do also need, what is the basis of our agreement? You know, we do have to say, you know, who there is one force that is in the wrong here, and for many people on the left, it's amazing to me how they can be confused over which country is in the wrong. But we also feel it really is going to fall for international solidarity with the Ukrainian people is the only way that I think there will be a peace that Ukrainian people will be happy with.
Hi everyone, my name's Zaziwe, or you can call me Zazie, no worries. I'm based in Cape Town. I actually heard about this event through a friend who I work with. So it's very nice to be here, nice to hear your comments. I just have a comment regarding this, and I don't know if I'm the only South African here, but I think I probably am. But I liked what Luma said about acknowledging also the participation during the situation in Afghanistan, because it's true. I mean, when the war broke out, I'll tell you, here in South Africa, we were quite horrified as well. But then obviously news broke out about how African students were being treated. And then sort of, we all kind of divided ourselves from the war. And it's something that still gets brought up today. So it's about also acknowledging these situations of racism and so on to get these movements to be more global. You know, acknowledging I do have a sense of, well, I am in a position where I have benefited just because of maybe the aspect of how I look. And I'm saying this as a person of color as well, because that's something I experience daily. And it's unfortunate because the moment those videos got out here in South Africa, the mood changed quickly. And I'm sure you've seen also on the news how we've been behaving about it in terms of Putin, who was going to potentially come here. So I completely agree with Luma. And it's nice to also hear someone acknowledging these things as a person of color as well. So thank you for that, Luma.
I was talking to a friend recently who was reflecting around solidarity, and she kind of like twisted the way that I think about these things for myself, that people who are oppressed always have strategies, which made me feel so powerful in that moment. Because it's like usually in the context I'm in, I'm like, I'm so powerless. There's nothing I can do, you know? But then like she was talking about And when you know, like Dafna and Olga have been mentioning this practical the whole time, and it's really true that it's practical things that are what build the strategies also, like in that moment, what you need. So I really hope that this is I really hope that this is like something, like for me, I really wanted to take some kind of inspiration from this to really believe in a common feminist strategy and movement and solidarity across really diverse kind of contexts. So this is something for me that's very inspiring that I'm taking from this conversation, actually.
We have people from 4 different continents joining the conversation about global feminist solidarity. I would classify that as inspirational and hopeful. I mean, people from different time zones, people from different generations, from very different contexts. So, I mean, I think that this means that the question is relevant and that it kind of like strikes the chord across very different contexts. And I think that there is definitely some hope for us out there.
What we are doing at the moment in Ukraine, for example, I think we are really producing the knowledge, but we do this not in an academical way, and this kind of knowledge production, and usually it is not in English, or we also avoiding using other imperial language, which is Russian. It is usually in Ukrainian, like it is something that not valued enough internationally, and we often face the situation. For example, like I'm working in NGO and I'm in these circles in fundraising. I'm often facing the situation when some big humanitarian organization approaching us and showing us their policies, their for example, safeguarding documents, policies on how you should in Ukraine organize your humanitarian assistance. Otherwise, you are not good enough to provide this assistance, And our knowledge, which is not written in the policies, which is not translated into English, but as grassroots activists, we do know how to not harm people, and because it is not our intention to harm somebody. And as feminist groups, we do better how to protect against some sexist gender-based violence, but we do not conceptualize this in a way people in the international organization expect. And at some point we can think about ourselves, and I see that many women organizations actually in Ukraine, they think about themselves as not educated enough or not good enough to receive this funds or solidarity from other countries, but yeah, when I just because I heard from other experience of oppressed groups that we can really say about our experience and about our knowledge that it is something more relevant. It gives me this courage, to argue with international organizations.
And the only strategy that I have understood works for me and the communities I'm part of in this particular moment, in this particular place I'm in, is to stay connected and not allow for things that maybe like the conditions that we live in to break those connections. It's very, maybe it's even sad like to say that it's such a small thing, but like if the connections become broken because of the conditions and because of the situations and because of the different things that we are constantly being pressed by, there is no hope. Like we just need to keep the connections strong, And actually for me, this goes to what you were saying about the knowledge that many groups and many people and many communities already have, that they really like. This is about being connected to what you know. You know what I mean? Like you protect your knowledge. you know what you know, and you're going to argue it with people who will press you because you are weak and because like you don't know what you know, But so it's a lot of pushing and a lot of constant like fighting back and protecting boundaries, but it's very important. And this is a strategy for me. It might seem very, very like minuscule, tiny thing, but it's so huge. It's so huge, So this is what I can tell you about my strategy. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm excited for this kind of like discussions we're having, because it's an attempt to build connections or keep connections. Yeah.